This episode is brought to you by Netflix's Remarkably Bright Creatures. What if a Pacific octopus held the key to a mystery that could heal your heart? Well, that's Tova's reality. An elderly widow working at an aquarium, Tova forms an unlikely friendship with the curmudgeonly Marcellus, whose remarkable intelligence leads her to a life-changing discovery. Remarkably Bright Creatures is now playing, only on Netflix.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
The big game commercials are basically must-see TV. This year, Elf Cosmetics went all out with an absurdly funny telenovela called Melissa. It stars Melissa McCarthy, Nicholas Gonzalez, Itati Cantoral, and Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil. The Elf Glow Reviver Lip Oil is an ultra-glossy tinted lip oil that nourishes, hydrates, and enhances your lips' natural color.
Watch the full episode of their new Elf novela on soyunbaño.com.
Ever wonder why so many people regain weight after stopping a GLP-1? Up to 40% of the weight lost can come from lean muscle. This weakens the body, slows metabolism, and makes it easier to put the pounds back on, creating a cycle of dependency. Prolon's 5-day fasting-mimicking diet offers a drug-free way to maintain results and support long-term metabolic health. In just 5 days, it activates fasting pathways to burn fat, protect muscle, and rejuvenate cells, all while letting you enjoy real food. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/iHeart. That's prolonlife.com/iHeart.
I'm here on a job site with Tim, who owns his own electrical contracting business.
3 employees and 2 work trucks.
Tim traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance. We're positively here where he needs us most.
They sure are.
With step-by-step help on all his insurance needs, all for shockingly low rates.
Shockingly low, huh?
Just a little bit of electrician humour. Do you get it?
I got it.
You know, it feels like we have a real connection. All right, I'll stop.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.
Welcome to One Thing Trump Did, available exclusively on the Middle podcast feed. I'm Jeremy Hobson. Each week on this podcast, we're looking at one thing President Trump did, since there is so much happening, and we're going to try and break things down in the same rational, nonpartisan, factual way we do on the Middle. In this episode, our one thing is the firing of so many federal workers in the name of cost cutting by the Department of Government Efficiency, which is headed by Elon Musk. The federal government is the largest employer in America with 3 million civilians on the payroll. Musk was asked how many employees he's looking to cut in total.
We wish to keep everyone who is doing a job that is essential and doing that job well. But if the job is not essential or they're not doing the job well, they obviously should not be on the public payroll.
Joining me now is USA Today chief political correspondent Phillip Bailey, who happens to hold the record for most frequent guest appearances on the Middle. Phillip, great to have you on One Thing Trump Did.
Jeremy, how's it going?
It's going very well. So the first thing that happened when it comes to these federal workers was that they got offered a buyout. They could leave their jobs, but be paid for the next several months. About 75,000 took that deal. But then the firings began. What do we know so far about how many people have been fired?
Good question, Jeremy. I mean, approximately, I think, like you said, 75,000 federal employees have taken that buyout. I believe now, as the layoffs continue, about 100,000 workers have taken those buyouts or been fired. So I think about 25,000 is where we're sitting at. And these numbers are going to fluctuate and change because I think the chaos is a part of the strategy here. I think it's to keep everyone sort of unsure about what's going on in the Agriculture Department, what's going on with the VA, what's going on at HUD, what's going on with the Social Security Administration, right? So we don't have any solid numbers because look, when you go on the Doge website, even when they post their receipts of all the windfalls and the cost savings, those change because there have been some calculating errors on this. We have never seen, Jeremy, this sort of axe or knife being taken to our federal workforce, particularly at the helm of the richest man in the world. Right? That's the part I think we have to keep reminding folks is that the president of the United States and the world's richest man have determined that there's all this waste, fraud, and abuse here. We're going after that. We're cutting folks back. We're saying who's efficient, who's not. And everyone sort of, in the administration at least, is keeping a smile on this and keeping a pretty face towards it. But more and more, you're hearing these federal workers and their unions speak out and saying, I wasn't even given really an explanation of why I was, right? So the number sits about 25,000, but I think we're in the moment. So some of this reporting will change day to day. So whatever number we say here today could be something different. Right. This second round of major layoffs is coming.
Well, you mentioned the unions. Not all federal workers are in unions, but do the unions have power to stop any of the layoffs?
Well, they have filed lawsuits and somewhat successful in that. And it depends on what courts do what. But I mean, you certainly have seen some of these unions for federal workers step up and put out a series of press releases and put out lawsuits and try to rally their employees, and initially urging a lot of them to stay, don't give in, don't give up, don't walk away from your job. But when it comes to anyone's ability to stop this, I mean, I think what we're seeing with Donald Trump do here, we haven't really seen a Republican president take this on to this degree, maybe since Ronald Reagan in about 40 something years ago in the 1980s. So the unions are, for the most part, powerless. There hasn't been any conversation about a strike. There hasn't been any conversation about a work stoppage, which would probably honestly feed into what Donald Trump and Elon Musk want, right? Is to further show and underscore, look, all these folks who want to sort of sit at home and not do their job and now protest or boycott. So I have a sense that when we are talking about this federal workforce and the changes that it's undergoing and this sort of anxiety that a lot of these federal workers, who, by the way, are getting these pink slips on a Friday afternoon, and many of them are still in their probationary status, and there's still a legal question of that in the courts right out of Northern California, with the judge there putting a halt to some of the probationary workers being laid off. I don't think we're going to get a full answer for the next couple of weeks as the unions and other opponents of Donald Trump's figure out what's the best strategy. The courts have had some limited aspects here. Like, again, the buyout was paused and then it was allowed to go forward. I think there are many folks in the opposition of Donald Trump who think that these court rulings can do something. But from what I'm seeing, Jeremy, from my vantage point, the unions are trying their mightiest. But ultimately, this president is testing his authority. And first place he started is overseeing the workforce, which many of his supporters and allies say, look, he's the president. Of course, he can fire all these folks, even though many of these entities and agencies and folks are protected by congressional law. And that's where the constitutional crisis question comes into play.
Right, because Congress is the part of the government that appropriates the funding for these departments and for these positions. So how could a president or an executive branch say, we're not going to pay what you've already said you want, Congress?
Because right now, the Congress, controlled by Republicans, their main ideology is their fealty to Donald Trump. I mean, go out here and try to find a Republican in the House or in the Senate who is willing to stand up for federal workers right now. I mean, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska has made some early comments and statements saying that she's concerned and people are calling up to her office. I have congressional Republicans who I've spoken to, their offices, their staffers, chief of staffs, who've told me that we got folks from our states calling us, with serious questions, not knowing what's happening, federal workers calling us, not knowing what's going on. The real question, I think, is for Senator John Thune and for Speaker Johnson. What are they going to do? And I think they're giving you the answer. Nothing, right? We are fresh off of an election where Donald Trump feels empowered, where his MAGA-fueled base certainly has had a full-blown takeover of the Republican Party. And there isn't any moderate or less than MAGA-aligned Republican right now who seems to be willing to put it on the line or leave it on the field and maybe filibuster or block it. Because, again, this is not coming from any sort of legislative action. This is the executive branch, and Congress at this point has not stepped up, not at all.
What about the people who have been laid off? We were going to be joined on this podcast right now by someone who was just let go from the General Services Administration in you said Friday afternoon. This person got a 1 a.m. email saying that their job was gone. They've been working in the federal government for decades and was concerned in the end that talking publicly could jeopardize any severance they might be entitled to. Are many fired workers, laid off workers speaking out publicly? Was it hard for you to contact people?
Well, the folks that I've been able to speak to and we at USA Today have been able to reach out to, for the most part, have been very willing and open to talk. But there have been, from notebook dumps from some of my colleagues and others in our conversations, of employees who have been contacted mysteriously by the Doge website or the Doge page on Facebook when they've made criticisms of these firings or criticisms of Elon Musk. Very big brother sort of behavior that you're hearing from a lot of these federal employees. But you're right. Some people are in that sort of wait and see space. They're like, I don't want to speak out because I haven't got my unemployment benefits yet. I don't want to speak out because, I'm worried about my severance package. Because again, these are folks who have said, look, I've gotten great reviews the entire time. One of our first stories out at USA Today was talking to folks who had gotten stellar reviews before this. And then they get a letter saying you're being let go because of your substandard work or you're below review or whatever else. And they're like, well, that's not true to what my record showed. So who's going to sort that out? It almost looks like we have a multi-class action lawsuit on our hands here, right, Jeremy? I mean, like, that's what I'm looking at here. But I don't think you're going to see this sorted out anytime soon. I mean, a lot of these employees who did this for civic purposes, right? A lot of these folks are not hardcore partisans. I mean, we're talking about people who work on soil erosion in Iowa, right? Trail maintenance for public parks in Montana, affordable housing in Maryland, ethics directors in DC. I mean, we're talking about really wonky, nerdy people here who got involved in government because it was a stable job and because they wanted to serve their country. So they're not hardcore partisans, but they are regular folks who I think are worried about what their future is and where their future lies. So you are seeing some folks who aren't as willing, but I think there's been a good chunk of people who feel like they've been wronged and are willing to speak out. But we should absolutely pay attention to those who feel intimidated. And when you hear their stories about the intimidation, again, it sounds straight out of Big Brother. I mean, you're having folks who are telling me, Jeremy, FAA workers who are saying, look, I want to say something to you. I want to speak out, but I just got a message from someone at Doge who saw my post on social media. And again, this relationship between Donald Trump and a lot of these social media owners and entities, including Elon Musk, who also owns X, formerly known as Twitter, there's a lot of sort of nervousness. I haven't seen anything like this before, right? People have been talking about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government, state government, local governments for decades.
Yeah.
The first time I've seen workers fear the government that they wanted to serve and work for.
Well, and you say waste, fraud, and abuse, and let's just focus. I mean, you take abuse and fraud out, and then you're just talking about waste, which you could classify just about anything that you don't want to spend money on as waste. But if you're talking about waste, and you say that these people have received, in many cases, perfect performance reviews, one of the things that I've noticed that's kind of surprising is the Trump administration has been letting people go who are in a probationary period, but the probationary period can also include, I just got a promotion because I was so good at my job. I got a promotion and I'm in a probationary period in my new role, and so I got fired.
Yeah, and the other part about it, Jeremy, by no means this is funny for folks, but I think it's just the calamity of the scale of this and what Musk and Trump are proposing. And people maybe perhaps who aren't paying as much attention, missing some of the nuances of some of these folks have been laid off and then immediately reinstated and brought back because it's the realization, oh, you do a pretty important job like guarding our, nuclear power plants or doing some really important work like for veterans, for disabilities. I mean, science agencies had to reinstate some of these. Like I think about several dozen folks from the National Science Foundation were reinstated after a court ruling and guidance from, I think, the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. So a lot of this looks clumsy because it is, because there hasn't been a standard other than that sort of broad waste, fraud, and abuse, which often I think is in a more political lens for people. There hasn't been an explanation of, well, why did these IRS, 6,000 IRS employees get laid off? Or why are these folks in HUD? And because, again, the Doge website is hit or miss, there is a lot of mystery in this. There is a lot of people asking questions, even of their member of Congress, who really can't, because that's usually where people go when they want an answer to getting a Social Security check or getting some sort of government service or help. They call their congressman, they call their senator, and those folks really don't know because the president of the United States has handed off making hiring and firing decisions for the government, for the federal government, over again to the richest man in the world who has eccentric behaviors, who has sort of on again, off again explanations that sometimes make sense and sometimes don't. Even during that first cabinet meeting, he admitted mistakes are going to be made, but these aren't mistakes for, a bicycle shop, hiring and firing at a local Walmart. These are hiring and firings of our federal system. And I was talking to a federal employee about this, and they reminded me the silent hand of government success. All the times that you see government doing the right thing that you really don't pay attention to because it did it fine before. So what's the like? What's that old saying? We're not going to put on the front page how many planes landed safe, because it just happens. But when it doesn't happen, when it doesn't work, that's when you'll notice it. And so when people are asking, how's this going to be absorbed? What's the long-term effects of this? Well, you're going to see it from all the little bitty things that the federal government does correctly that you don't notice because it does it well and it's not a problem. Well, when those things start to malfunction or there start to be some adjustments that maybe the states have to take on, maybe the cities have to take on, maybe the private sector has to take more and more on, that's where I think you're going to see the realization of what is truly happening before us right now.
Well, and I want to talk just after our break about how these cuts are affecting all of us or may affect all of us. But one more thing before we take that break, which is all these employees had to fill out those 5 things you did last week emails, or some of them did. Some of their bosses told them, don't worry about it. That doesn't apply to you. And then they said, actually, it does apply to you. Did those actually matter, or are people who filled those out still being let go?
When Musk was confronted with this, he sort of tried to dodge it a little bit and say, oh, we just really did that just to see if these people are actually alive, right? That they actually respond to their emails, that it's actually a person on there. So I wouldn't be shocked if you had some federal employees come forward and say, I was fired because I didn't fill out that 5 questions, didn't respond, where other folks are being told, don't worry, that doesn't apply to you. And I think, not all federal employees, unfortunately, are created equally. Right? Like the assistant U.S. attorney in Massachusetts is different than, again, the woman who's working on the trails for public parks in Montana. And I think that's what you're really seeing. It's completely arbitrary. There doesn't seem to be any sort of directive of, or a yardstick of, here's who gets fired, here's who stays. Here are the agencies that are exempt. Here are the agencies where it's really going to be a crackdown and it matter. And I think that's the point too, is that it's giving all of these different Trump acolytes who are in these positions now the freedom to decide on their own, right? So when this give us the 5 things that you've done from Musk, well, some departments and agencies said, don't worry about that, doesn't apply to you, but others said, no, that does, and that gives me the ability to fire you if I want to. So it's really going to be the testimony of each and every federal employee who steps forward, and only until we are able to go through this haystack of firings and memos and edicts will we really be able to discern and give, I think, people a fuller map of what we're experiencing. But it's as with Donald Trump and everything else in the campaign and 1.0, this is an unprecedented shift and cut to federal workforce.
We're speaking with USA Today Chief Political Correspondent Phillip Bailey on One Thing Trump Did. We'll be right back in a moment.
It's an Olympics you'll never forget. Prime time in Milan. The moments.
Chloe Kim with the gold medal flex.
The stars.
Ilya Malinin.
Out of this world.
The spectacle from beautiful northern Italy with very special guests every night of the Olympics. Experience the world's biggest show. Prime time in Milan. Tonight, 8/7 Central on NBC and Peacock.
Welcome to the A Building. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba. It's 1969. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had both been assassinated, and Black America was at a breaking point. Rioting and protests broke out on an unprecedented scale.
In Atlanta, Georgia, at Martin's alma mater, Morehouse College, the students had their own protest. It featured two prominent figures in Black history, Martin Luther King Sr. and a young student, Samuel L. Jackson.
To be in what we really thought was a revolution. I mean, people were dying.
1968, the murder of Dr. King, which traumatized everyone.
The FBI had a role in the murder of a Black Panther leader in Chicago.
This story is about protest. It echoes in today's world far more than it should, and it will blow your mind.
Listen to the A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is Ryder Strong, and I have a new podcast called The Red Weather.
It was many and many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea.
In 1995, my neighbor, Anna Trainer, disappeared from a commune.
It was hard to wrap your head around. It was nature and trees and praying and drugs.
So no, I am not your guru.
And back then, I lied to my parents, I lied to police, I lied to everybody.
There were years, Ryder, where I could not say your name.
I've decided to go back to my hometown in Northern California, interview my friends, family, talk to police, journalists, whomever I can, to try to find out what actually happened.
Isn't it a little bit weird that they obsess over hippies in the woods and not the obvious boyfriend?
They have had this case for 30 years.
I'll teach you sons of to come around here and my wife.
Boom, boom. This is The Red Weather. Listen to The Red Weather on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I actually drop better when I'm high. It heightens my senses, calms me down. If anything, I'm more careful. Honestly, it just helps me focus.
That's probably what the driver who killed a 4-year-old told himself. And now he's in prison. You see, no matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to One Thing Trump Did, exclusively on the Middle podcast feed. I'm Jeremy Hobson. This episode, we're talking about the ongoing firings of workers across the federal government. I'm joined by USA Today Chief Political Correspondent Phillip Bailey. Phillip, there has been some pushback already, including by some Republicans, about the lack of compassion here, that people are losing their jobs, their benefits. They may have mortgages and car payments and other expenses, kids. What are you hearing from fired federal workers about the impact on their own lives?
Wow. It's amazing to me how we look at federal workers. A lot of people don't look at them as private sector workers. There is this sort of dismissal of them. Federal workers that we've spoken to at USA Today run the gamut. There are some who don't know what they're going to do next. They have been in civic service for decades, and they're not really sure what comes next. Like, again, the severance package, do they get unemployment? They're applying. There was one woman we spoke to, shout out to my colleagues, Sarah Wire, Riley Began, Terry Collins, and others, Samantha Leach, and she was talking about, look, she's worked in the Federal Bureau of Engraving and Printing, and she was saying, even though she's gotten a 5 out of 5 score in her performance review, that couldn't protect her. And many of these employees are worried about, so this letter says that I was dismissed or fired for this reason, even though I got perfect scores on my, reviews and everything. So how's that going to affect my ability to get another job in the private sector, right? Like, here you are holding up this letter from the federal government saying you were fired because of this, when your review is the exact opposite. Will that ever be sorted out? So the uncertainty and the anxiety, particularly at a time where the mantra of the 2024 election on both sides was the cost of living, right? People keeping up with their paychecks, how difficult it is, and how the affordability crisis, the rent is too damn high, et cetera, in this country. One of the first things that Donald Trump is doing is letting go all of these folks, which may, by the way, have an impact down the line on unemployment rates as well.
Well, and that's my next question is, I was a business reporter for many years, and things like hurricanes can actually have an impact on the GDP because of the downturn in economic activity, let's say in Florida or Georgia or something like that. If you're talking about thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even more than 100,000 federal workers being laid off, are there concerns that this could lead to a recession in the U.S.?
Well, I think that everyone is sort of bracing for the potential of that. I know that President Trump and his allies will say, look, they'll continue to hit the waste, fraud, and abuse mantra. But yet, injecting tens of thousands of unemployed people into the economy will have an impact. It's just a matter of when is that measured and how the economy will absorb that, right? Like, I think that, look, each week, the Labor Department's Employment and Training Administration, they report the numbers of people who've, filed for state unemployment benefits.
Right.
Other numbers are going to come in. I think that different states are going to be hit with this differently. Like in Oklahoma, for example, they're going to have a whole different problem with this, with their federal workforce being laid off than in New York. Because we're already seeing Democratic governors, Jeremy, in blue states try to say, hey, look, we're going to step up and we're going to try to absorb some of these folks. Come work for the state government, right? You're going to have a lot of people with a lot of experience, right, who are going to be now in the workforce. And they may get scooped up by the private sector. I think that a lot of more free market thinkers would argue that, look, those people are going to be hired here. I did read a report about folks from intelligence agencies might be scooped up from by foreign governments, given their background and expertise, which may not be a good thing. May not be. So much of this reporting and these stories, Jeremy, have been listening to folks give you their, not the numbers. I'll be honest, like a lot of my reporting lately has not been about numbers. It's been about the heart. It's been about the anxiety. It's been about not people who again didn't do this because they were some wild-eyed liberal or some hardcore conservative. They wanted to serve their country. And outside the military, how do you do that? And we can judge each of these people's jobs and performances individually. And I think there is a credible viewpoint here from Trump supporters who I talk to who say, look, I think every 2 years the federal government should be doing this. And I think there is a vital and viable conversation about we should be examining what our government spends its money on and are these jobs necessary and what are we doing here? But that doesn't seem to be what we're doing in this situation. It doesn't seem like we're going through with a fine-tooth comb. It appears as if we're looking and saying that right there, get rid of all of that. We just don't like it. And I think that's the political part of this that's beginning to emerge that I think we're seeing in some of these poll numbers already, the American people's squeamishness about this is it being done to actually absorb and go after cost savings?
Right.
Or is it simply looking at entities and parts of the bureaucracy that you find politically objectionable?
Well, and by the way, even if you took away like half of all the federal workers, you're still not going to make that big of a dent in the deficits and the debt because so much of the money that is spent by the federal government goes to benefits, not people. It's going to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Yeah, I mean, we're a giant insurance company with guns. I mean, that's where our company goes in this country, right? Like, it's if you really are a deficit hawk, you have two stark choices here, and we understood for decades why those things were never touched. Either you go into entitlements or you go into the military, right? Like there's much more cost savings in shutting down and closing a military base than firing 50 people from the agriculture department, firing 1,000 people from the IRS. But I think that also goes back to, Jeremy, the political part of this, which the Trump administration and his allies have not hidden. A February 26th memo from OMB Director Russ Voigt, I mean, it best explains the official reason. And he said the federal government is costly, inefficient, and, quote, deeply in debt, unquote. No mention, by the way, of tax cuts and other things that add to that, by the way, that this administration presumably wants to extend those Trump tax cuts. But Voigt said this, and I thought this was very interesting to read out here. And I wanted to call this point out specifically in that memo. He said, quote, Voigt said, quote, at the same time, it is not producing results for the American public. Instead, tax dollars are being siphoned off to fund unproductive and unnecessary programs that benefit radical interest groups while hurting hardworking American citizens, unquote. And I was talking to a Republican activist about this who worked in a previous Republican administration, I'll say that. And they were saying that, look, every time a Republican is elected, whether it's Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, first Donald Trump, Basically, even when they win, like with Trump with the popular vote, they're sitting on top of a liberal bureaucracy of all these things that have been installed through the budget, through the tax code over decades. And you're finally seeing, and this is why I think when you talk to Trump supporters, they're elated about this, even when, Jeremy, it might be a program that they benefit from or someone that they know benefit, because they see this as a larger political mission of every time we vote our Congress in or our conservative person in to get something done, they sit on top of this bureaucracy that honestly provided a lot of resistance to Donald Trump in 1.0. So I think that if we pull back here and look at the actual words that the administration is saying, that's your answer right there. Programs that benefit radical interest groups in their viewpoint, that liberal bureaucracy that resisted Donald Trump the first time, that's your ethics folks, right? That's your people who are overseeing and saying, no, no, Mr. President 1.0. Get those folks up out of here. Because if we're really going after the cost savings, Jeremy, the real question is, what is Doge going to do with the Pentagon and entitlements?
Well, and I also think back to what happened in Kansas many years ago when Sam Brownback, who was the governor, very conservative guy, very small government conservative, went in, made huge tax cuts. They had to make big cuts to their education system. And it was so bad for the people of Kansas that the Republican legislature overturned his veto and undid those tax cuts because they realized, oh, actually, we do need that money for the schools. What kind of impact are we going to see as Americans when you cut hundreds of people from the FAA or so many people from the national parks, the CDC? Do you have a sense of what we're going to see, how we're going to see this in our daily lives?
I think that the story that awakened for me how serious this could be was a few days ago. I think it was CNBC, and they spoke to former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley, who just recently was vying for DNC chairman. So take that, put that into context that, Martin O'Malley just a few weeks ago was trying to be the leader of the opposition. But he also, under the Biden administration, served, I believe, as his administrator for, Social Security. And Governor O'Malley told CNBC point blank, he sees in the next 30 to 90 days with some of these cuts, a total system collapse and an interruption of benefits where you could see checks being missed, being spent or sent out. If that starts, we're going to have a problem on our hands. Don't turn over, have folks not get their Social Security check. Now, maybe Martin O'Malley, again, who was just trying to be DNC chair, is lighting his hair on fire and causing a ruckus to create a bad headline for the Trump administration. But those benefit checks for roughly 72 million Americans being at risk would be a significant. I mean, we think that what's going on with the airlines and the air traffic controllers. I mean, I'll tell you what has really the saving grace for Donald Trump, Jeremy, was when that Southwest Airlines pilot at the last second lifted that plane out of the sky that didn't collide with the jet. Thank goodness, all the lives that were spared because of that. But that would have reintroduced the conversation about what's happening with our air traffic controllers. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, that silent hand of success. Every time the federal government does what it's supposed to do and you just don't notice it. What happens when there's a natural disaster? Yeah. What happens when or if some of these Social Security checks get delayed? We've laid off how many IRS workers right before tax return season? And who's going to be disproportionately affected by that will be your states that are more dependent on the federal government, your poorer states, which tend to be red states that went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I think this is a political question that is really exclusive to the right, to the MAGA right. I've already seen, Josh Hawley and some pretty conservative voices speak out and say, we're not touching Medicaid, right? Because as Steve Bannon, one of Trump's former advisors, one of his closest confidants, at least in 1.0, as he said on his show, a lot of MAGA folks are on Medicaid. So the impact of this could be grave, it could be deep, but it could also, though, be, I think, a stark realization for Trump's opposition of what this election and how consequential it actually is. Because when I talk to, Trump supporters, not even federal workers, Jeremy, Trump supporters, and I asked them about this, they are fully, even if they're not paying attention to all the details and know every in and out, they're telling me this is what we wanted. This is absolutely, there is going to be some pain. They are
Yeah.
fully acknowledging to me there's going to be some pain involved in this.
But what about on the other side? We're already seeing these town hall meetings where people are getting really upset with Republican members of Congress and voicing their concerns about these cuts. I think back to the Tea Party after Obama was elected, coming in and getting very angry, and then they really did have an impact in the midterm elections in 2010. What kind of response has there been? Is it as much as you expected, more or less? Will it get bigger? What do you think?
Well, I mean, I look at some of the poll numbers and those town hall meetings. The area that I'm looking for mainly is with independents, right? Like NPR Marist released a poll recently that found like 55% of Americans believe that these staff and funding cuts to the federal government will do more harm than good. That includes 61% of independents, right? Um, I think that same survey found that 60% of residents or 60% of US adults believe most federal government employees are essential to the function of the government. Um, that sway with independents for those middle of the road, for those more, not like say moderate, but those swing state Republicans in those congressional districts. But these are some of these, town halls are happening in deep red areas though too. Um, the question is for the Republican Party, and I think this is very difficult for any party when you have a popular president at the helm who's doing things that may not always be popular in your district or your neck of the woods, is who's going to have that courage. I think the early signs show that there is a chink in Donald Trump's armor, which I think when you look at the issues that he really leans into that are very popular, like immigration and deportation, I think I've always said to folks, Jeremy, that if the politics go bad for Donald Trump, the showmanship will go up. We'll see deportations on TV every night, right? If people start really getting upset with this until he maybe finally relents. And of course, I think one strategy could always be throwing Elon Musk himself under the bus, potentially. Right. But no, I think that these town halls are the first sign that this isn't what some people voted for. I think also when you look at that special election in Maine, an area in which Donald Trump won by a small percentage, but a Democrat winning there pretty decisively. So, look, I think that we have a lot to absorb here, a lot to figure out. But I do think that these town halls, they're the first indication, but I think I need to see a little bit more than that, right? Because my questions about those town halls are, is that happening organically? Is that happening from outside groups? Is that happening from people? Are those people speaking out those town halls, Trump supporters who've turned, or are those folks who are always the liberal person in that area, in that district, who didn't like any of this stuff anyway? And I'm interested to see, particularly in some of these states that rely so much on the federal. Again, a lot of your conservative red Republican states are welfare states. My home state of Kentucky being one of them, right? Like as much as it might vote one way, it is reliant on Illinois, California, New York putting money into this pot, and we all pull money out of it when we need it for disaster relief or Social Security or Medicaid or whatever else. And I have the feeling that these town halls right now are the first signs of it, but you're going to need a monumental movement, particularly in the first two. I mean, he's only been in office for 6 weeks, so you like everyone who's like, we need to put this. It's like he just got there, you all, and he.
Well, and let me ask you just finally on that point. He's only been in office for a matter of weeks. Is this just the beginning, though, in terms of the layoffs? Are they going to ramp up, or are we getting towards the end of them? Do we have any sense of how far he's going to go?
I think this is just the beginning. We've already seen, and my man Joey Garrison, one of our White House reporters, has written about this, that there's already been these warnings of a new round of more aggressive layoffs. And I think you're going to see, particularly some of these more liberal pet projects and parts of liberal bureaucracy that will be attacked and gone after and cut or eliminated altogether. The Department of Education, that's still the open question. Will there even be a Department of Education this year? I think that you're going to see the Trump administration sort of figure this out. But I think that again, I'll go back to that Voight memo. I think this is the point. I think the Department of Education's days are numbered personally. I just think that it's pretty clear from the political direction that this administration is going, but it's also a question of when, right? Not if. That's how I look at this, is that we're going to methodically go through each of these sectors of the federal government, and the parts that we may find some actual waste, fraud, and abuse in, great. But some parts that we just find to be, no, we won the election and we don't want to put money into this anymore. I mean, that's the true message of that memo. Things that we find politically objectionable, we're getting rid of them. And they may have been here for 10, 20, 30 years, but not on my watch. And this president feels emboldened. I think this Congress has emboldened him even further. And unless you see, you are seeing some protests, and like you said, you mentioned the town halls, but unless you see a monumental sort of pushback from the American public, in some of these polling numbers, we're not there yet. We're not at 68, 70, 80% of Americans connected to this.
That is Phillip Bailey, who is the chief political correspondent for USA Today. Phillip, thank you so much.
Jeremy, as always.
And thanks to you for listening to One Thing Trump Did. It was produced by Harrison Patino. Our next middle episode is coming to your podcast feeds later this week. It is a conversation about trans rights, which of course have come under attack since President Trump took office. And if you like this podcast, please rate it wherever you get your podcast. Tell your friends and sign up for automatic downloads. Our theme music was composed by Noah Haidu. I'm Jeremy Hobson. Talk to you soon.
Over the last couple years, didn't we learn that the folding chair was invented by Black people because of what happened in Alabama?
The Montgomery Brawl.
This Black History Month, the podcast Selective Ignorance with Mandy B unpacks Black history and culture with comedy, clarity, and conversations that shake the status quo. The Crown Act in New York was signed in July of 2019, and that is a bill that was passed to prohibit discrimination based on hairstyles associated with race. To hear this and more, listen to Selective Ignorance with Mandy B from the Black Effect Podcast Network on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
1969, Malcolm and Martin are gone. America is in crisis. And at Morehouse College, the students make their move.
These students, including a young Samuel L. Jackson, locked up the members of the Board of Trustees, including Martin Luther King Sr. It's the true story of protest and rebellion in Black American history that you'll never forget. I'm Hans Charles.
I'm Menelik Lumumba.
Listen to The A Building on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
14 years in prison for killing a young woman. A 15-year sentence for a crash that caused 3 deaths. 12 and a half years for killing a child and critically injuring her mother. All true stories. All caused by marijuana-impaired drivers. No matter what you tell yourself, if you feel different, you drive different. So, if you're high, just don't drive. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
When segregation was a law, one mysterious Black club owner, Charlie Fitzgerald, had his own rules.
Segregation in the day, integration at night.
It was like stepping on another world.
Was he a businessman? A criminal? A hero?
Charlie was an example of power. They had to crush him.
Charlie's Place, from Atlas Obscura and Visit Myrtle Beach. Listen to Charlie's Place on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.